You think you know hunger? You think a missed lunch is suffering? We live in a world of flavor, of comfort, of choice. But what if there was no choice? What if the only thing on the menu was survival? Before the first flame was ever tamed, for hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors ate things that would break your mind. They were forced to consume a diet so grotesque, so dangerous, it would kill a modern human in days. This wasn't about taste. This was a brutal daily war against starvation. And the things they put in their mouths will haunt you. Chapter 1. The World Before Fire, a Raw Existence. Forget everything you think you know about the natural world. Forget the peaceful hikes, the beautiful sunsets, the idea of living at one with nature. For our most ancient ancestors, the ones who existed in the silent, dark eon before fire, nature wasn't a friend. It was a monster. A relentless, soul-crushing force that demanded everything and gave nothing back willingly. Imagine waking up not to an alarm clock, but to the deep, aching cramp of hunger in your belly. It's not the "I'm ready for breakfast" kind of hunger. It's a gnawing, acidic emptiness that has been your constant companion since the day you were born. The sun is barely cracking the horizon, casting long, menacing shadows from strange, twisted trees. But there's no warmth. The air is cold, damp, and carries scents that your modern nose would find repulsive. But to them it's the morning newspaper, the smell of distant decay, the musk of a predator that passed in the night, the faint, metallic hint of blood on the wind. This is life over 1,000,000 years ago. There is no fire. Think about that for a second. No comforting campfire to gather around. No torch to push back the suffocating, absolute darkness of the night. No flame to cook your food. Every single meal, every single day for your entire brutally short life, is raw. The world they inhabited was a place of profound sensory overload and deprivation all at once. Their eyes, not yet accustomed to the soft glow of controlled light, were sharper in the gloom. Their ears could distinguish the snap of a twig under a predator's paw from 100 yards away. Their sense of smell was a life-or-death instrument. But their sense of taste? Comfort? Forget it. Food wasn't about pleasure. It wasn't about community gatherings or shared meals. It was a desperate, frantic, and often disgusting necessity. Every day was a gamble. The energy you spent looking for food could easily be more than the calories you got from it. A twisted ankle wasn't an inconvenience, it was a death sentence. You couldn't rest and recover. You'd be left behind, a forgotten meal for the hyenas. This wasn't living as we understand it. It was a state of perpetual high-stakes survival, a raw existence in the truest sense of the word. And at the heart of this struggle, at the very center of their terrifying world, was the constant, horrifying question of what they would be forced to eat next. Your body is a marvel of modern adaptation. Your small teeth are perfect for chewing cooked, softened foods. Your stomach and intestines are relatively short, designed to efficiently process nutrient-dense, easily digestible meals. You are, from a biological standpoint, a creature built by and for the flame. Now look at them. This is the skull of Homo habilis, the handy man. Look at those teeth. They're larger than ours, more robust, sure, but they are a pathetic tool against what they truly faced. They were not the teeth of a lion or a wolf, designed to rip and tear through thick hide. They were generalist teeth, a biological compromise. They were good for grinding tough plants but terrible for shearing raw muscle. Now imagine trying to eat an uncooked potato. It's difficult, gritty, and your stomach would revolt. Our ancestors faced this reality with every root they dug up. Their jaws had to work relentlessly for hours every day just to break down fibrous plant matter enough to swallow. The strain on their jaw muscles would be like a modern human chewing on leather for a living. Researchers have found stress fractures and extreme wear on their fossilized teeth, silent testimony to a lifetime of brutal chewing. But the real horror show began after they swallowed. A raw diet is a biological siege. Their digestive systems were in a constant state of war. Raw meat, if they could even get it, carries a bacterial load that would send a modern human into septic shock. Raw plants are often worse. Many are laced with chemical defenses, toxins, anti-nutrients, and indigestible fibers designed by the plants to avoid being eaten. Their bodies had to expend a colossal amount of energy just to extract a meager amount of nutrition. This is the concept of a negative food. You could eat something, but the caloric cost of digesting it would be more than the calories it provided. Starving with a full stomach. It's a biological paradox that was their daily reality. We see evidence of this struggle etched into their very bones. Fossil records show signs of severe malnutrition, anemia, and stunted growth. They were perpetually exhausted, not just from the physical exertion of finding food, but from the internal, unseen battle of simply trying to digest it. Every bite was a roll of the dice, a gamble that their overworked guts could handle the assault. This constant, desperate hunt for digestible calories defined their entire social structure. There were no artists, no philosophers, no builders sitting around planning for the future. There was only the present, the now. Their small clans, likely no more than 20 or 30 individuals, were a fragile, mobile unit of hungry eyes and empty stomachs. Their entire day from sunrise to sunset was dictated by what biologists call optimal foraging theory. But let's call it what it was, a desperate, calorie-counting marathon. They couldn't afford to wander aimlessly. Every step had to be calculated. They knew their territory with an intimacy we can't even fathom. They knew which patches of ground might hide tubers, which trees might bear edible leaves, and most importantly, they knew the habits of the real killers. They followed the great predators, the saber-toothed cats, the giant hyenas, not to hunt them but to shadow them, to wait for them to finish a kill. Their existence was one of second-hand victories. But the most terrifying part of their day wasn't the hunt. It was the end of it. As dusk approached, a primal fear would grip the clan. The coming of night didn't mean rest. It meant vulnerability. Without fire, the darkness was absolute and belonged to the predators. They would have to find a defensible position, a cave, a dense thicket of thorns, a high rock ledge, and huddle together for warmth and the illusion of safety. Imagine that feeling. Huddled in the pitch black, listening to the sounds of the night. The grunt of a bear, the whoop of a hyena, the terrifying silence that means something big is moving close by. Sleep was not a peaceful recharge. It was a state of high alert, punctuated by moments of sheer terror. And all the while, the hunger gnawed at them. Even if they had managed to find some food that day, a few roots, some insects, a handful of bitter leaves, it was never enough. The cold of the night would leach their precious calories away, and they would wake up, if they woke up at all, even hungrier than before. This wasn't a cycle of life. It was a terrifying, relentless grind. A world without fire wasn't just a world without cooked food. It was a world without safety, without warmth, and without a moment's peace. It was a raw, brutal, and terrifying existence. Chapter 2, The Scavenger's Gamble, Marrow, Brains, and Guts. We have this heroic image of the caveman hunter. A brave figure with a spear taking down a mighty mammoth. It's a powerful story. It makes us feel strong, like we were always destined to be at the top of the food chain. But for the vast majority of our early history, that story is a complete and utter lie. We weren't the hunters. We were the cleanup crew. We were the skulking, shadowy figures waiting in the tall grass, our hearts pounding in our chests, praying for the real killers to finish their meal. We were scavengers. And it was a terrifying high-stakes gamble every single time. Look at this scene. The Macaridus, the saber-tooth, has made its kill. It is the king of this landscape. It eats its fill, gorging on the best parts. The rich, powerful muscle meat, the nutrient-dense liver, the heart. It takes what it wants, and the laws of the ancient world are simple. The strongest eat first. Our ancestors, small, slow, and armed with nothing but rocks and sticks, stood no chance against a predator like this. A direct confrontation would be suicide. So they waited. Imagine the tension. Hiding in the brush, the smell of fresh blood thick in the air, a scent so powerful it's almost intoxicating to their starving bodies. But they have to fight every instinct that tells them to run towards the food. They have to watch, wait, and hope. They watch as the cat eats its fill. Then they watch as the next tier of the food chain moves in, the giant hyenas, powerful bone-crushing beasts that could kill a hominin with a single bite. The clan remains hidden, silent, their stomachs twisting with a mixture of terror and desperate anticipation. Every rustle of the grass, every distant roar, sends a jolt of panic through them. This isn't just about waiting for a meal, it's about not becoming one. The world around the kill site is a landscape of fear. It's a magnet for every predator for miles around. For our ancestors, approaching that carcass was like a modern soldier crossing a minefield. The potential reward was life itself, a massive injection of calories. But one wrong step, one moment of bad timing, and it was game over. This was the scavenger's gamble. Finally, the coast is clear. The great predators are gone. Now is their chance. But what's left? It's not a pretty sight. The carcass has been ripped open, the prime cuts of meat devoured. What remains is a gory mess of skin, sinew, and bone, already starting to fester under the hot sun, buzzing with thick clouds of flies. To you, it would be a disgusting, hazardous waste site. To them, it was a treasure chest waiting to be unlocked. Their first challenge was getting through the hide. The remaining skin of an animal like a prehistoric buffalo is like a suit of leather armor. Their weak fingernails and blunt teeth are useless against it. This is where human ingenuity took its first crucial step. That simple piece of sharpened rock, the Oldowan chopper, was the key. It wasn't a weapon for hunting, it was a prehistoric butcher's knife. It was the tool that allowed them to do what no other primate could: process a megafauna carcass. Watch as they work frantically. This is a race against time. The scent of the kill will continue to attract more scavengers, and they are the weakest ones here. They use the sharp edges of the flint to saw and slice through the tough skin, to cut away the stubborn bits of muscle and connective tissue that the big cats couldn't be bothered with. The meat they get is stringy, tough, and riddled with bacteria. It's the gristle, the scraps, the leftovers that are barely edible. Eating this raw, bacteria-laden meat was incredibly dangerous. It would have been crawling with salmonella, E. coli, and countless other pathogens that would cripple a modern person. Their immune systems must have been astonishingly robust, but even so, it was a constant battle. Diarrhea, dysentery, and parasitic infections would have been a common and often fatal consequence of their diet. But they had no choice. These scraps, these dangerous, semi-putrid morsels, were a vital source of protein that their plant-based diet desperately lacked. It was a disgusting, risky meal, but it kept them alive. However, the real prize, the jackpot they were truly after, wasn't on the outside of the bones. It was locked deep inside. This is the moment that changed everything. This is what separated us from every other animal on the planet. The big cats with their tearing claws and teeth, and the hyenas with their bone-crushing jaws, could get the meat. But they couldn't get to the single most concentrated source of calories in the entire animal kingdom: the bone marrow. After all the meat was gone, our ancestors would gather the long bones and, most importantly, the skull. This was the final, most crucial part of the scavenger's gamble. He raises the heavy stone, the hammerstone, high above his head. For a moment, he is the image of a creator, a destroyer, a being of intention. Then he brings it down with all his might. A loud, sharp crack echoes, and the scene is shown in visceral detail. The thick femur splits open, and inside is a glistening, waxy, yellow-white substance. It's bone marrow. To our modern sensibilities, it's a greasy, unappetizing sight. To our starving ancestor, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. This wasn't just food, it was life-giving energy in its purest form. Marrow is almost pure fat and protein, a caloric bomb that required almost no chewing. They would have used their fingers or a stick to scoop out the precious, rich substance, devouring it on the spot. But the ultimate prize was locked inside the cranium. Using the same technique, they would smash open the skull. And inside, the brain. A trembling, fatty organ, packed with DHA and other complex lipids. Scientists now believe this act, the deliberate breaking of bone and skulls to get at the marrow and brains, was the catalyst for our own evolution. This disgusting, horrifying meal was quite literally brain food. The immense caloric surplus provided by marrow and brains gave our bodies the fuel needed to grow a larger, more complex, and more energy-demanding brain. It was a feedback loop. Smarter hominins were better at finding carcasses and using tools to get the marrow. More marrow meant more fuel for the brain to grow even larger. We weren't just eating to survive anymore. We were eating to become human. And it was all thanks to a disgusting, desperate gamble on the leftovers of giants. Chapter 3: The Horrors of a Raw Plant Diet. The story of our ancestors' diet isn't just one of blood and bone. While the scavenged carcass provided the explosive bursts of calories they needed to grow their brains, the daily, grinding reality was far less dramatic, and in many ways far more miserable. It was a life spent foraging. But you need to erase the modern, romantic image of a gentle forager, plucking sweet, juicy berries from a bush. That world didn't exist yet. The plants our ancestors faced were not friends. They were armed, they were defiant, and they fought back in silent, chemical warfare. For every one plant in their environment that was edible, there were 10 that were indigestible, and another 10 that were outright poison. There were no neatly organized aisles, no labels, no inherited wisdom from generations of farmers. There was only a terrifying green wall of unknowns. Their daily diet would have consisted of things we would find completely inedible: tough leaves, bitter stems, woody roots, and seeds as hard as pebbles. Think of the toughest kale or celery you've ever had, and now imagine it being 10 times more fibrous, 10 times more bitter. This was the baseline. These were their fallback foods, the miserable, low-quality sustenance they relied on when the hunt for carcasses failed. Their entire day would be spent roaming, searching, and chewing. Endlessly chewing. The sheer amount of physical energy required to break down this plant matter was immense. Their jaws, as we've seen, were under constant strain, but their digestive system was the real battlefield. Imagine filling your stomach with handfuls of tough, raw leaves. Your gut would struggle, churning and cramping, fighting to extract a pathetic handful of calories from the indigestible fiber. This process, known as hindgut fermentation, would have produced enormous amounts of intestinal gas, leading to constant bloating, discomfort, and painful cramps. They would have felt perpetually full, yet simultaneously they were starving. They were caught in a cruel biological trap, a diet that filled their bellies but left their bodies starved of the real energy they needed to survive. This wasn't a healthy, plant-based lifestyle. It was a desperate, painful, and exhausting way to stave off death for one more day. The exhaustion and pain of digesting tough fibers was a constant misery. But the true horror of their plant-based diet was the invisible threat: poison. Every plant you see is a sophisticated chemical factory. To protect themselves from being eaten, they produce a vast arsenal of toxins and anti-nutrients. For our ancestors, every new leaf, every strange fruit, every unknown root was a game of Russian roulette. Let's imagine a scenario. A young member of the clan, driven by a gnawing hunger that overpowers his caution, sees a vibrant, plump berry he's never seen before. It looks juicy. It looks promising. He eats it. For a moment, there's a burst of sweetness, a welcome relief from the bitter leaves. And then the plant's defenses kick in. Within an hour, his stomach starts to cramp violently. A cold sweat breaks out on his skin. He starts to vomit, his body desperately trying to expel the poison. But it's too late. The neurotoxins in the berry have already begun their work, shutting down his nervous system. His limbs grow weak, he collapses, unable to move, unable to call for help. The clan can only watch in terror as he dies, a silent, agonizing lesson in botany. This is not speculation. This is how knowledge was built. One death at a time. They would have learned to be incredibly cautious, likely only eating small amounts of a new plant and waiting to see the effects. They would have watched what other animals ate, but even that was an unreliable guide, as a bird could safely eat a berry that was deadly to a hominin. Their food sources were booby-trapped. Even the safe plants were a problem. They were loaded with anti-nutrients like tannins, which bind to proteins and prevent their absorption, or oxalates, which can form tiny, sharp crystals in the kidneys, causing excruciating pain. Lectins, another common plant defense, could damage the lining of their gut, causing chronic inflammation and preventing the absorption of what few nutrients they were getting. So even when the plants didn't kill them outright, they were slowly, insidiously making them weaker, sicker, and more malnourished. Every bite was a risk, and every meal contributed to the slow breakdown of their bodies. When the leaves were too bitter and the berries too poisonous, our ancestors turned to the one place left to look for food: underground. They became experts at finding underground storage organs, tubers and roots. These were the plant's emergency rations, buried deep in the earth to survive droughts and fires. And for our ancestors they were a lifeline. But getting to them was a brutal, thankless task. There were no shovels, no tools to make the job easy. They had only their hands and perhaps a sharpened stick. They would dig for hours under the blistering sun, tearing at the compacted, rocky soil, breaking their fingernails, scraping their knuckles raw. The energy they expended was immense. They had to be certain that the calories they would get from the root would be more than the calories they burned just getting it out of the ground. It was another exhausting calculation in their daily war against starvation. And if they finally managed to unearth one, it wasn't a smooth, clean potato. It was a gnarled, woody, and incredibly tough object, caked in dirt and grit. And they couldn't just wash it off. With no reliable source of clean water, they ate it as it was, dirt and all. This introduced the final, grinding horror of their plant diet: abrasion. The fossilized teeth of these early hominins tell a horrifying story. Microscopic analysis reveals deep scratches and pits, not just from chewing tough fibers, but from the constant grinding of sand, grit, and abrasive silica particles that were embedded in their food. Their teeth were being literally sanded down with every meal. Imagine chewing on sandpaper for your entire life. By the time they were young adults, their molars would have been worn flat, the enamel completely gone, exposing the sensitive dentin and pulp beneath. This would have led to excruciating chronic toothaches, abscesses that could swell up and poison their entire system, and a constant agonizing pain that made the simple act of eating a torment. So even when they found a reliable source of calories, a food that wouldn't poison them, it came at the cost of slowly and painfully destroying the very tools they needed to eat it. It was a cruel, inescapable cycle of suffering hidden beneath the earth. Chapter 4. The Parasite Nightmare, a Body Under Siege. We've seen the struggle, the starvation, the desperate gambles our ancestors took for every single calorie. But the most terrifying consequence of their diet wasn't a quick death in the jaws of a lion, or even the slow agony of starvation. It was the silent, invisible invasion that happened after every meal. Every bite of raw, bacteria-laden meat, every gritty, unwashed root they pulled from the earth, was a Trojan horse. It delivered not just meager nutrition, but a teeming army of invaders ready to wage war on their insides. Their bodies were not their own. They were a walking ecosystem, a host for a horrifying menagerie of parasites. Forget the abstract, clinical terms. Let's call them what they were, monsters. With every swallow of scavenged flesh, they risked ingesting the eggs of tapeworms, some of which could grow to be over 20 feet long inside their intestines. With every drink from a murky waterhole, they welcomed legions of protozoa like Giardia, microscopic terrors that would turn their guts into a watery hell. And with every step they took barefoot on contaminated soil, the larvae of hookworms could burrow directly through their skin, beginning a ghastly journey through their bloodstream to their lungs and finally their intestines. Imagine it. A small, almost invisible worm forcing its way through the sole of your foot. You might feel a slight itch, nothing more. But the invasion has begun. This wasn't a rare occurrence. It was a constant, unavoidable reality. The fossil record can't show us these soft-bodied creatures directly, but the evidence of their carnage is written all over the bones our ancestors left behind. The reason they were so lean, so gaunt, wasn't just a lack of food. It was because every calorie they managed to consume had to be shared with a writhing colony of thieves living inside them. The parasites latched onto the walls of their intestines, siphoning off nutrients, drinking their blood, and leaving them in a state of perpetual malnutrition. They were eating for dozens, sometimes hundreds, of silent, hungry mouths that were not their own. Their fight for survival wasn't just against the world outside, it was against the teeming, hidden world within. Let's talk about the tapeworm. It is a masterpiece of parasitic engineering. Once its egg is ingested, it hatches in the intestine and anchors itself to the gut wall with a crown of cruel hooks and suckers. And then it grows. Segment by segment, it builds its horrifying body, stealing the nourishment directly from the food our ancestor just fought so hard to find and chew. It gives nothing back. It only takes. The host would feel a constant, gnawing hunger that could never be satisfied, accompanied by debilitating cramps and chronic, unpredictable bouts of diarrhea. They would feel it moving inside them, a living ribbon of horror, a constant, physical reminder of their internal corruption. But some invaders were even more insidious. The hookworm, after its journey through the body, would also attach to the intestinal wall. But it wasn't there just to steal food. It was there to drink blood. Each worm is a tiny vampire, and a severe infection could mean hosting hundreds of them at once, each one creating a small, bleeding wound in the gut. The result? A catastrophic, lifelong case of iron deficiency anemia. Now, we can connect this horror to the science. Paleoanthropologists frequently discover ancient hominin skulls with a strange, porous, and spongy texture in the eye sockets, a condition called parodic hyperostosis. For years, it was thought to be just a sign of malnutrition. But we now know it's the body's desperate, last-ditch effort to fight severe anemia. The bone marrow, trying to produce more red blood cells to replace the ones being drunk by the worms, expands so aggressively that it deforms the very bone of the skull. Imagine what that felt like. A constant, crushing fatigue. An inability to catch your breath, even when resting. Your heart pounding in your chest, trying to circulate oxygen that isn't there. Your skin would be pale, your mind cloudy. You would be too weak to hunt, too tired to forage, too slow to escape a predator. You were being bled dry from the inside out, a walking ghost, kept alive only to feed the parasites that were killing you. This was the daily reality for countless of our ancestors. For these ancient humans, the nightmare didn't always stay confined to their gut. Sometimes it escaped. In one of nature's most horrifying twists, the larval stage of certain tapeworms, ingested from contaminated meat, wouldn't mature in the intestines. Instead, they would treat the gut wall like a subway station, burrowing through it and entering the highway of the bloodstream. From there, they could travel anywhere in the body, eventually settling in muscles, the liver, the eyes, and in the most terrifying scenario of all, the brain. This condition, known as cysticercosis, would have been the ultimate horror. The larva, lodged in the soft tissue of the brain, would encase itself in a fluid-filled sac, a cyst. To the clan, the effects would be inexplicable, supernatural. A strong, healthy member of the group might suddenly collapse, their body convulsing in a violent seizure. They might scream about things no one else could see, struck down by a sudden, terrifying madness. They could go blind or lose control of their limbs. Their very personality could change, transforming a familiar companion into a dangerous, unpredictable stranger. How would they have interpreted this? A curse? An evil spirit? An attack by a vengeful god? There was no concept of microbiology, no understanding of the invisible enemy they had consumed weeks or months before. All they knew was that one of their own had been stolen from the inside out, their mind broken by an unseen force. The victim would be feared, shunned, and likely abandoned to die. They became a terrifying omen, a walking symbol of the dangers lurking in their food. This was the ultimate siege. Their bodies were not a sanctuary, they were a hunting ground. Parasites stole their food, drank their blood, and invaded their minds. This constant, internal war weakened them, shortened their already brutal lives, and introduced a level of fear and superstition into their social fabric that we can barely comprehend. Before they could ever conquer the world, our ancestors first had to survive the horrifying, microscopic war being waged within their own flesh and blood. Chapter 5. How Raw Food Forged the Human Brain. This is the end result. The human brain. The most complex object in the known universe. 3 pounds of soft tissue that can contemplate the stars, compose a symphony, build a skyscraper, and even reflect on its own distant past. Every thought you've ever had, every memory you cherish, every creative spark, it all happens right here. But this incredible machine comes at a staggering price. Your brain, while making up only 2% of your body weight, consumes a whopping 20% of your daily caloric intake. It is a ravenously hungry organ. This presents a huge evolutionary puzzle. How did we get this brain? How did nature afford the immense energy bill required to grow and maintain it? For decades, the story was simple. We started using tools, which led to better food, which led to bigger brains. But that's a tidy, clean story. And nature is rarely tidy or clean. The real answer is far more shocking. It's a conclusion that forces us to look back at all the horror, all the disgust, all the suffering we've just witnessed, and see it in a completely new light. The key to our intelligence wasn't just that we found new food. It's the specific and frankly grotesque foods we were forced to eat. Let's go back to that kill site. To the shattered bones and the fractured skulls. Remember the scavenger's ultimate prize, the marrow and the brains. We viewed it as a disgusting, desperate meal. But from a purely biochemical perspective, it was rocket fuel for the mind. Marrow is one of the most calorically dense substances in nature, almost entirely composed of fat. Brains are a unique package of high-energy lipids, including omega-3 fatty acids like DHA, the literal building blocks of neural tissue. When our ancestors used a rock to smash open a femur or a skull, they weren't just eating a meal. They were mainlining the essential components for cognitive evolution. This horrifying diet, born of desperation and scavenging, was the singular nutritional event that ignited the fire of human consciousness. This is the heart of the expensive tissue hypothesis. It's a simple trade-off. To afford the massive energy cost of a big brain, you have to save energy somewhere else. You can't just keep adding expensive organs. For humans, the trade was our gut. As we shifted from a diet of tough, hard-to-digest plants to one that included these incredibly dense, easily absorbed superfoods, marrow and brains, our digestive system no longer needed to be so large and energy-intensive. A diet rich in raw plants requires a long, complex gut to ferment all that fiber. A diet of raw meat and fat can be processed by a much shorter, simpler digestive tract. As our guts shrank, the energy that was once used for hours of painful digestion was freed up. And evolution, in its relentless opportunism, diverted that energy surplus straight to our heads. Our stomachs shrank so our brains could grow. Think about the feedback loop this created. A hominin with a slightly larger, slightly more efficient brain would be better at remembering the location of kill sites. They'd be more innovative with their tools, more efficient at cracking bones. They might even be better at social coordination, working as a team to scare off other scavengers. This gave them better access to the very brain-building foods that fueled their cognitive advantage in the first place. More marrow meant bigger brains. Bigger brains meant more marrow. It's a staggering thought. The raw, bloody act of scavenging, a behavior we might look down on as primitive and lowly, was the very thing that made us who we are. We didn't climb to the top of the food chain and then grow a big brain. We grew a big brain by eating the scraps and leftovers from the top of the food chain. It wasn't our strength, but our cunning and our willingness to eat the disgusting, nutrient-packed leftovers of fearsome predators that set us on the path to intelligence. Our genius was born from gore. So, what were they forced to eat before fire? They were forced to eat rotting scraps riddled with bacteria. They were forced to chew on poisonous leaves and gritty, tooth-shattering roots. They were forced to host a horrifying army of parasites that drained their life away. They were forced to consume a diet of such profound misery and danger that it would sicken and kill a modern human in a matter of days. And in doing so, they stumbled upon the key to unlocking the human mind. The invention of fire, when it finally arrived, would change everything. It would neutralize the poisons in plants, kill the parasites in meat, and unlock even more calories through the magic of cooking. It would give us safety in the night and warmth against the cold. It would allow our brains, already supercharged by a diet of raw marrow, to flourish and expand even further, leading to language, art, and civilization. But we must never forget the price that was paid in that long, dark, fireless dawn. The suffering was not meaningless. The horror was not in vain. It was the brutal, agonizing, and disgusting crucible in which the human mind was forged. The next time you sit down to a warm, cooked meal, surrounded by safety and comfort, take a moment to remember them. Remember the scavengers, the foragers, the walking battlegrounds who endured a nightmare world so that you could exist. They ate horror and they birthed consciousness. The foundation of everything we are, everything we have built, rests on the disgusting, desperate meals they were forced to eat before fire was ever invented. It's a wild thought, isn't it? That the very things that turn our stomachs today are the reason we can even think about it at all. It kind of puts our own dinner complaints into perspective. What they went through is almost impossible for us to truly comprehend, but it's a crucial part of our shared human story. What part of this journey shocked you the most? Was it the idea of scavenging from saber-toothed cats, or the silent, internal war against parasites? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one, and I'm genuinely curious to know what hits home for you. If you found yourself fascinated by this deep dive into our raw past, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We explore the most incredible and often terrifying parts of the human story every week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching. Now go enjoy a nice cooked meal. You've earned it.